All right, thank you so much, Drew. I really appreciate it. So the topic today is building a social enterprise. And what better examples to have a company like Marketo. Delighted to have you here, Sanjay. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
And it's obviously a topic that's very dear to my heart, given that I've been at Hootsuite now for about 2 months and was at Cisco for 15 years and head of social and really driving the social business. So I know firsthand what that challenge is to be able to work across departments to try and show the value of social. So I'd love to kick it off then with a discussion about change, because I think part of this role of CDO and everything we're discussing here today is really talking about cultural change and what happens in the organization. So I'd love it if you could tell us, Sanjay, from your perspective as CMO at Marketo, what is the shift you're seeing internally? What does this Chief Digital Officer mean to you? And are you seeing the emergence of kind of new roles?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Hi, everybody. How are you doing? Hope the day's been great. Fundamentally for us, and you talk about how do you navigate the change in an organization, it's about setting context for everybody. The world's changed, right? Digital has transformed not just our jobs, but the reason our jobs have transformed is because buying has changed. And as soon as I inside the organization say, do we all want to make money? Right? Everybody sort of sets up. And what I mean by buying has changed is this fundamental realization that, think about when you bought a car 10 years ago, right? You went down to the car dealer and you talked to that salesperson. They had all the information and you had to suffer through it, right? We all remember how that felt. Now think about how you buy a car today, right? I go online, I know, the VIN number of the car I want, I know what ship it came off, I know the invoice price to the dealer, I know dealer rebates, I know the commission that poor schmuck's gonna make on the car. And I'm out of there in 40 minutes, right? It's because I have all the power, right? I have all the information. And that's because we live in a world of the Google search box. It's because we live in a social world where I have the ability to tweet out to my network or post to my Facebook friends, hey, what do you know about X car, right? And so now all the data has shown that across industries, whether it's consumer products or B2B products, that 70% of the buying process is done before you ever come talk to me as a company, right? Whether that's walking into a showroom, whether that's walking into a retail store, or talking to a sales rep. And if I haven't, as the organization, engaged with you in that front 70%, I might as well forget it, right? You're somewhere else. And that's the job, in that front 70% of the marketer, of the Chief Digital Officer. Whatever label we want to call it, we as a company aren't going to make any money if we're not engaged during that front 70% of that process. And so that's what I think is teeing up this, this big shift, this big transformation, an imperative to make our organization a social business.
So maybe you can give us some examples of how you've implemented social. You and I have talked about the work that Marketo's doing, the Marketing the Nation is a fantastic program, and you guys have content everywhere. Everywhere I go online, I see your content, which is great. So tell us how you did that. How did you implement social, and how has that changed how you do marketing and how you interact with your customers? Yeah,
gosh, across all fronts, at its most simple level, if I think about it just within marketing, one of my, and just by way of background, so folks know, I came to Marketo I was the CEO of a social marketing software company called Crowd Factory. Before that, had helped pioneer the social CRM space at a company called Lithium Technology. So I got to hang around the social net for a while and talk to people about what they were doing and how they were thinking about it. And so all of that translated into, a one-sentence lesson for me that I've sort of brought into Marketo, which goes to tell you that I'm a slow learner. But I would say to people, for gosh sake, please don't do a social campaign. I'd leave a dramatic pause for effect, and everybody would look at me like I had 3 heads. You're like, dude, you run a social software company. And then I would say, what you really need to do is make every campaign social, right? Thinking about it as a isolated, siloed activity or channel sub-optimizes the whole thing. Instead, thinking about it as a layer across everything that we do is where you really get the power of it, right? The fundamental power of social is in its scale, right? I can market to 5 or 10 people, you know, on an individual basis, et cetera, you know, because the holy grail for us marketers has always been word of mouth, right, for the last 1,000 years. And that happened in 5s and 10s. I never knew it was happening. It happened on the sidewalk. It happened down the hall. But now with social, it can happen at massive scale, right? Tens of thousands, millions, and I can actually see it happening, right? I can actually track it and measure it. And so what we've done at Marketo is sort of with that core principle, at least across all of the marketing, how do we integrate that into everything we're doing? So if I'm doing an email campaign, you know, I'm going to make sure that there's a social component on the back end. If I'm spending money with Google on AdWords, if I get one person to click on that ad and land on a landing page, and that costs me $1, if I have a social engagement there that actually grabs the person and has them push it out to their network and 4 more people come back, and by the way, you know, every one of us on average has about 400 in our networks, that click cost me 20 cents, not $1. And as soon as people started thinking like that, it became pervasive, right, throughout the community. And so that's just on the marketing side. You know, my product team, as soon as I showed the product team the fact that, man, you can get people to drive your product roadmap and prioritize, you know, what are the most important things to you, and not have to do surveys and go out and conduct 100-person, you know, one-on-one interviews, but actually use the power of social to look for those things. As soon as I, you know, was able to show the services organization, you know, the fact that, hey, I can pick up these signals and deflect service and support calls and actually improve the customer experience, you know, people got really excited. So
I want to delve into that, because that's a really important part of social business, is being able to tell that business impact story with other departments, especially support and sales. And I think every company is probably at a different level of adoption, and not every marketer probably is the change agent that you are perhaps at Marketo. Can you talk about how you sold it into different departments, the kind of process you went through, and maybe a challenge you encountered and how you were able to kind of get through?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's about tying it to something that people care about, right? Which is their existing metrics and MBOs, not creating some other new set of metrics. You know, I think the panel before us, as they were talking about smart data, you know, they talked about, well, let's not talk about clicks. Let's talk about, you know, metrics that other people care about, like revenue, et cetera. And so putting social in the context of those metrics and how we looked at things, and treating it as the same type of activity as these other things was hugely important. So, you know, within marketing, for instance, it was about multi-touch attribution, right? I think everybody in this room, you know, sort of understands the, you know, sort of the marketing mix is critical. You know, if you just look at your last touch attribution and said, you know what, I'm not going to do any of the other things because just this last touch attribution is the most important thing for me, every marketer would say, you're crazy, right? We know that it takes, you know, again, depending on your business, 10, 15 different interactions across different activities to get somebody to, you know, to buy something, to convert in some way that you care about. Social is just one of those interactions. And so as soon as we started looking at it from the multi-touch attribution perspective, we realized how important it was in that journey of that prospect or customer. And similarly with the sales organization, I got a quota. I got a number to make. Right? And as soon as you can show them that, hey, because of the social, you're able to get to that person before anybody else, they jumped right on board.
So is your sales team using social? Are they doing social selling?
Absolutely, absolutely, right? I mean, you know, this transformation that we talked about earlier that, you know, has changed buying has not just been based on the fact that the marketer, or I'm sorry, the buyer has all this information. It's been based on the fact that speed is so critical. You know, I call it the real-time economy now, right? You know, I always tell the story about one customer when I came into the business where I sort of just was seeking to understand. And I said, you know, so, you know, why us? And he said, well, you know, they raised my number. I needed, you know, they wouldn't give me as many more people, so I needed to come up with another solution. And so I must have been doing some things. I tweeted a question out to my network. I, you know, visited a couple of pages, and all of a sudden my phone rang. And it was a Marketo sales rep. I said, wow, that's a cool story. So, you know, I asked then, so how did we compare to the bad guys? He said, I didn't talk to the bad guys. Because they didn't call me for like another 3 weeks, right? So that sales rep, you gotta believe, went and spread that as gospel, right? Across the entire team, saying, oh my God, I just won this deal uncontested because I was listening and was able to respond in real time. And I was able to retire quota, right? This isn't about it's a cool technology or anything like that. It's because it helps me win.
So it's interesting because that's an obvious success with a team, but how do you scale that globally? Because a lot of us, I think, have been challenged with how do you move from department to department? How do you scale globally to replicate that success? If you have that one sales leader that could make that connection, how are you enabling your organization? Is there education, training? Can you talk a bit about maybe how you engaged employees? How can you scale so that there's advice for folks that are kind of dealing with that same issue?
Yeah, I mean, education is ultimately the key, right? And when I say education, it's not education, again, about social or the tools. It's education about how does it connect to the outcomes that you're measured on, right? And if we frame it in those terms, the uptake is much, much greater, right? Because people understand that what you're doing is just giving me an opportunity to be more successful with my job, as opposed to, hey, we're having social training. Rather, it's, we're going to talk about how we can actually use these new capabilities to get you to your number faster, to help you, retire, more support calls faster, et cetera, and being able to drag it across the organization that way. 1, 2, these super users matter, right? Get those advocates engaged. They actually will be really effective in spreading the gospel, so to speak. 3, leadership matters. If people don't see the signal from the management team or the management level that this is important, and it's just about asking questions. Even it's not about necessarily, I now as the CMO or the CEO, I have to be blogging every day to signal to the organization that the social thing's important. Because again, that signals something about the technology. That's not it. It's in your reviews, let's say with the sales organization as an example, when you're reviewing their pipeline and how they're doing, ask questions about not just have you reached out to the prospects, have you been engaged with them on LinkedIn, on Twitter, et cetera. And as you reinforce that kind of behavior, it's all about making it the fabric of what they're doing every day.
Great. Okay, so let's throw some challenges in there. I saw a Forrester report that said the top 3 challenges with social marketing are number 1, ROI, number 2, measurement, and number 3, lack of internal resources. I'd love your thoughts on how do you address those challenges? Are you seeing the same things? Again, advice for folks here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the measurement piece and the ROI obviously go hand in hand. And as I said a little bit earlier, the key thing for me has been being able to look at it on a multi-touch basis. That allows us to get out of what I frankly think of as the stupid conversation about, well, what's your ROI on social? Because you often don't get this question of, well, what's your ROI on your PPC ads? What's your ROI on your email programs? What's your ROI on those trade shows? Rather, right, it's what's your ROI on your marketing? And so being able to look at it on that basis has been extremely helpful. The second thing that's been helpful is now, because we can measure it, because it is digital, it is ones and zeros, and we can actually track it, we can actually look at this lift aspect. Because one of the powerful things about social is that it's free, right? And so when I'm able to show on an individual program basis the fact that we sent that email campaign out to a segment of 200,000 people, but because of the social engagement that happened, it actually got put in front of 150,000 more people who I didn't know for free. That starts to get people's attention.
So when you talk about social lift, are you talking about advertising equivalent or engagement? How do you specifically measure that?
Yeah, I mean, it's both, really. I mean, the first basic component is the advertising equivalent, right? Okay. People talk about paid media versus earned media. You can think about it as the earned media because I didn't actually have to go buy that audience. What I did was actually use the power of the crowd, right? Power of the people who I did reach. I learned this, years ago from some folks that we were working with at Molson Coors. They were doing this, terrific, essentially paid campaign with the NHL. Turns out, by the way, that Canadians like to drink beer when they're watching hockey. So they were doing this campaign with the NHL. And they said, well, you know what, we're sending these communications out to people, and we've invested in all this content. They were basically taking outtakes of the video from commercials that they had done together. They said, well, we're sending this stuff out. Why not see if we can get people to engage with it, share it, push it out to their friends? Because, by the way, with social, the advantage to social from an emotional perspective is your prospects and brands, as soon as they touch it socially, it becomes theirs, not yours. And what they found was they literally doubled the reach without having to pay, for additional advertising equivalents.
Great.
And that was obviously a message that played really well with the CFO.
I would imagine. So we have about 2 minutes left. Are there any questions in the audience for Sanjay and Marketo? All right. No questions? I would like to get a question with you about, in particular, advice. Again, we've talked a lot about how to scale, how to not just make it a campaign and integrate it. I'm curious about, if you think holistically about how CMOs can help make their business social, what is some advice you have on how you've make that discussion happen in the C-suite versus just having that happen in marketing? Are you going across department and give some advice to the marketers here on how they can drive that?
Yeah, I think one of the, it's sort of attaching to all of these trends, right, at the C level that are resonant. The panel before us talked about one of them, which is big data, right? In the C-suite, at the exec staff level, people actually don't know exactly what it means, but boy, we're talking about it, I'm hearing about it. We say, what's all this big data about? And translating that to, well, we care about this big data. Because it helps us make more money. It helps us make more money. Why? Because it helps us get closer to customers, and it helps us work in real time better. And everybody will have that story, right? As an exec, I have my story of, I was moving, and on my list of 150 things to do in the day was I had to find a moving company, and in a small window of time, I went online, searched on moving, something like that, asked a friend, anybody have a recommendation? I filled out one of these forms, which went to 50 different companies, I'm sure, and somebody called me in like the next 10 minutes. They got the business. Over the next week, 49 other people called me. I was done. And that conversation in the C-suite about the fact that this data, this listening in the social universe allows you to act in real time before your competitors do is the reason we got to do this. Certainly has resonated, at Marketo and has, resonated with other companies that I've seen be really successful.
Right. I've seen the same thing too with listening, is really having that discussion with the C-suite about calling that the voice of the customer. These aren't just, the executives, teenagers that are on Facebook tweeting with friends. These are actual customers that are, tweeting about purchase behavior. So a lot of opportunity there for listening engagement. Great. We are out of time. Any other questions before we turn it over to Drew? I would like to thank everyone for joining us. Thank you so much. And make a note about education enablement. Hootsuite has an offer for those of you that are here joining us. We have a new social media certification program with Newhouse, which is the Syracuse University School of Communications. And those of you that are interested in more education opportunities, let us know. Give us your business card. We're giving away free access to that course as part of this show. So thank you very much. Thank you, Sanjay. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeanette. Thank you.